As a student, Tim paid into church funds from his grant. Each member is expected to contribute at least a tithe, or 10% of their income, before tax, as well as 2 annual offerings of much larger amounts. And that, some critics believe, is what the church is really all about.
I think after my experience for 7 years, I can say that the whole purpose of the group is controlling, and the more you control, the more power you have, the more money you have, the more control you have. It's all interlinked circle. In reality, when you have so much influence, so much power, and so many new converts, you slowly lose focus of your purpose, and you move on into more, if you like, an ulterior motive, whereby your desire is no longer to spread the gospel, is to get more membership and get more money and get more power.
Money, sex and power are the ingredients of dysfunction. We've just had, well, I wouldn't say celebrated, we've just commemorated the 20th anniversary of the death at Jonestown. And that can show you how a man who had a basic instinct of goodness to help the poor in Indianapolis and in San Francisco moved to becoming a deranged psychopath, leading 1,000 people to their deaths in a massacre in a jungle.
It's a doorway to danger, in my view. You know, is there such a thing as a small bit of danger and a big bit of danger? You've actually hit the nail on the head. The potential for disaster remains in every cult, because if it gets carried away on the authoritarian teaching of one individual, the danger you have is Jim Jones and the People's Temple, or more recently the Waco disaster.
I think whenever people lose perspective, anything is possible. I would not wish to accuse this group of taking that kind of line or seeking to take that kind of line. Certainly, as I say, a number of the folks that I've met have been very, very pleasant, very decent, very committed people. I don't think they're in that league. But having said that, I mean, I think theologically they're every bit as dangerous.
Did you ever consider abduction?
I suppose in your wildest thoughts, you probably do consider it. But it's not very viable to abduct somebody in their early 20s and try and lock them up. It's not very sensible. Because if they want to go back, they're going to make an effort to go back. You're just hoping that they come to their reason and see through what they've got themselves involved in.
The International Church of Christ withdrew its team from Belfast in 1994 because it failed to recruit enough converts. Last Tuesday, this 19-year-old was baptised at 1 in the morning in the sea off Carrickfergus, as his family, with whom he lives, was away on holiday.
When the baptism came along, I was studying like then daily for 2 weeks. The day of the baptism, I'd studied for 3.5 hours in the morning, and then I think it was about 7 hours at night. So you're talking about 10.5 to 11 hours that day, as well as work. So I was basically physically exhausted and glad to be getting it over with by that stage.
The church worked hard to ensure the youth went through with the baptism. Its local leader, Roy, even bought a camcorder to record the event for posterity.
I think the words that they used was historical person, that everybody would be looking on to me as being the number one. Roy actually went out and bought a video camera to video it, to make sure that people would be able to see what was happening at baptism. I was getting phone calls from Dublin as well to congratulate me that I was going through with it.
But now the West Belfast youth wants out. On reflection, he says he sees what he did was wrong and that he was railroaded into membership.
To me, the teachings of the International Church of Christ aren't what I would believe in. Certainly I believe in everything that the Bible teaches, but not to the extremes that these people are taking it to. Some people would go as far to call it brainwashing and manipulation. I wouldn't use those exact words, but it wouldn't be that far off it.
Bridget only wishes her daughter would jump ship too, a daughter who's told her family they're all going to hell.
Have you come to terms with it in any way?
I don't think anybody would ever come to terms. It's like a death, you know, like you've lost a daughter to a church. And I think you go through a grieving process as well. It's just, it's sad.
You're still going through that, obviously.
Yes, and I think it'll be a long time before you get, you know, I don't think you'll ever get over it.
So far, this sort of trauma has affected a relatively small number of families, but clerics say it's something that shouldn't be ignored.
One young person caught in this fabric of this network of belief and discipleship and control is one too many. Therefore, it would be quite wrong either to wait until it grew and became impossible to manage, or it would be quite wrong for the sake of one young person to say nothing.
They want to see family conflict. They want to be able to use that to their own ends. So they do. They want to see friction within a home, over the church, so they can befriend them.
Is it possible to put into words how much you miss your daughter at this stage?
We miss her very much. She was a very important part of our family, and she's missed very much by her brothers and sisters. And we would love to see her home and see much more of her than we're seeing of her, because there's a big gap in our family without her.
Do you think you will ever reclaim the relationship that you formerly had with her?
We live in hope. We live in hope that we will.
Well, that report was compiled by Conor Macaulay. The International Church of Christ declined several invitations over the last couple of weeks to take part in tonight's programme. We asked if we could film a service, interview members or leaders in Belfast or Dublin. We were turned down. But this evening, one of its London elders, Adrian Hill, did talk to us at some length about specific issues raised in tonight's programme, and the following is a summary of his response. The International Church of Christ does not manipulate or dominate the lives of members. The Church teaches what Jesus taught. Christianity is not a once-a-week thing, it's a way of life. Jesus told us to take up our cross and follow him. That is what we do. We do not target vulnerable people. Many young people have become members, and they have very opinionated and strong-minded views. We do have people in the Church who are vulnerable, and we have a specific ministry to care for those people. We have members in their 90s. Many of us are now in our 40s and in our 50s. The Bible teaches about tithing. Many other churches agree with that. It's a biblical principle that by tithing you are blessed. It's a principle that works. We do not put people under financial pressure, and in fact we teach them how to manage finances. We don't insist that they tithe and get into debt. We go further than required by the Inland Revenue in detailing our accounts. We've been examined by the Charities Commission, and we've been given a clean bill of health, squeaky clean. Anybody who lives the life Jesus commanded goes to heaven. Jesus himself told us that to many who do things in his name, he will ultimately say, I never knew you. The Church is always happy to talk to any individual who has any questions, whatever, about us. And finally, Mr. Hill reminded us the Church's Singapore branch recently took legal action against a newspaper which called it a cult, and won. So, that is the insight for tonight. We will be back next Thursday with another issue. Until then, thanks for your company. Good night.